everybody. I think we're live now. I think because we have some new people with us today, we have Carl and Nathan. So perhaps if everybody went round the table, said who they are, so that you know who we are. Would you like to start, Hamza? Oh, yeah.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Fatima Khanshah, and I am the West Yorkshire Inclusivity Champion.
Morning, everybody. Tamsin Hart-Jones, Assistant Director at Homes England.
Morning, everyone. Great to see you all. I'm Richard Butterfield. I work for Historic England in the north.
Hi, everyone. My name's Nathan Spencer. I'm the MD of UK Reef and also Board Trustee at Fusion Housing.
Carl Oxford, Exec Director of Palm Coast Society, CIC.
And Lisa Littlefair, City Director at Mark MacDonald.
Denise Jeffrey, Leader of Wakefield Council.
Listener Director of Police and Environment and Place at the Combined Authority. And you've all used the technology so beautifully so far, but I did promise that I would just mention, please do use the speakers. It enables people to hear, but also the cameras, because we're live streaming, will pan to you when you've got your microphone on.
Alison Gillespie, Head of Place and Environment Policy at the Combined Authority.
Councillor Alex Ross Shaw, Portfolio Holder for Regeneration, Planning and Transport on Bradford Council.
I'm Councillor Sarah Courtney. I'm Lead Member for Regeneration and Transport on Calderdale Council.
I'm Councillor Moses Crook. I'm Deputy Leader of Kirklees Council, also of Housing and Transport Portfolios.
Hi, I'm Councillor Jess Lennox. I'm the Exec Board member in Leeds for Housing, which takes in housing growth and affordable housing for 1 week longer, and then I'm moving on, so this will be my last time with you.
Guy Rodriguez, part Research and Intelligence team at the Combined Authority.
Hi, Rebecca Greenwood, Head of Housing Policy at the Combined Authority.
Okay, so we have apologies from Rachel Dennis and Stephen Moore.
Thank you very much. A declaration of disposal of community interest. Anyone got any interest? No, thank you. And I don't think there are any exempt items requiring the exclusion of the press, so we can move on then. Can we agree the minutes of the meeting on the 10th of July? Those of us over here, thank you. And then can we welcome you, Carl, to the meeting? It's good to see you. You're newly appointed representative on the committee, and you've obviously already said who you are, but it's great to see you here. And it's also nice and good to see you here at Prima K Reef. We're obviously expecting great things from you next year. No pressure. Okay, we go on to item 6 then. Can we ask you to take the report?
Good morning. So the monitoring paper, as always, provides the committee with the most up-to-date indicators following the housing dashboard that was following its approval at March 2025 committee meeting. And the indicators reported are reported in 4 different objectives within contextual and performance indicators. I'll just highlight some of the new data we have, not all that is included in the report itself. So under the objective 1, we have new information regarding housing starts and completions funded by Homes England. So in 24-25, the number of housing starts funded by Homes England showed an increase of 700 starts compared with the previous year, which puts housing starts around 2,000 homes in the financial. This is the highest number of housing starts funded by Homes England in West Yorkshire since 2016-2017 fiscal year. However, the number of affordable homes within this group dropped slightly by 89 units. And the total number of affordable homes within those ones were 940, so slightly below half of it. This potentially reflects registered providers waiting for the Affordable Homes Program breach funding of 2 million, which has been announced in 25 of March 2025. In terms of completions, we've seen also an increase to 1.4 thousand homes completed in 25. Sorry, it's not increase, it's stable, but it's a positive number, especially as the affordable ones are 1.1 thousand, so the majority of them. These 2 years have been the highest numbers since we have publication data from 2016-2017. A significant driver of the increase of home completions is the inclusion of houses defined as first homes. Just members to note that housing starts and completions cannot be added together. There's some risk of double counting. Under Objective 2, we have rental growth. So the second quarter of 2025, rents grew by 2.6% in West Yorkshire compared with 7% in England, so substantially below the rental inflation in the country. And England's rental inflation has been growing at around 5% or more since the fourth quarter of 2024, and West Yorkshire has been performing better in recent years. Over the long term, the difference is not so large. So since 2016, rents in West Yorkshire grew by 41% compared with 48% in England. So in the years after 2016, our rental inflation was a bit higher than average, and now we have been offsetting that effect. In terms of temporary accommodation, after a period that the number of households in temporary accommodation rose between 2019 and 2024, the first quarter of 2025 shows some potential signs of stabilization at the regional level, so good news. The number of households living in temporary accommodation declined from 1.7 thousand to 1.6 thousand, but still significantly above the level seen in the end of 2019 prior to the COVID pandemic. Households with children in temporary accommodation increased slightly, but shows some signals of stabilization as well. As it increased, therefore, the share of households in temporary accommodation with children has been rising over the last years, and currently at almost 2/3, 58% of all households in temporary accommodation have children. The stabilization mentioned, it's not uniform across local authorities. Leeds continues to have the highest number and raised. By contrast, the stabilization has been mostly done with Bradford and Kirklees having a decline in the number of households living in temporary accommodation. Under Objective 3, Home Energy West Yorkshire, there are around 1,700 homes that already benefited from the program as part of our social housing decarbonation work in the first wave, and it is forecasted at a similar number in the second wave, which is ongoing, and the third wave, the target is slightly above 5,000, so a significant level above the previous ones. Under Objective 4, we have data on crime, on the perceived crime, so the perceived risk of household crime, including fraud and computer misuse in West Yorkshire, has been improving. So between 2016 and 2022, West Yorkshire had the highest rate of perceived household crime among the peer areas, and significantly above the national average, between 8 and 14%, and the last 2 years the rate fell significantly to 6% in 2024 and 3% in 2025, the lowest rate of any of the regions analyzed. This reflects the work that has been taking place, driving down crime. We just take some cautions that these estimates have confidence intervals, so there's always some uncertainty about the exact ranks, but the movements that we've done from 2016 so far, they fall outside the confidence interval, so we can say there's been an improvement. In terms of other indicators that we track outside the housing dashboard, we have house prices that grew 5% in West Yorkshire in the last 12 months, compared with 3.4% in England. So unlike rents and prices, median prices have been rising above the national average, which is common across all districts except Leeds. And in terms of prices itself, all local authorities still have lower prices than average, as you would expect, and Bradford and Calderdale median house prices are still below the 200,000.
Thanks very much. There were two things that I wanted to comment on. One is the Brownfield Housing Fund, and I noticed from 3.4 and 3.5 that there is an additional £21 million of funding going into that fund, but also from Appendix 1 that there was only one scheme currently in Kirklees, and it's actually quite a small scheme as well. So I just wanted to note that, and hopefully some of the additional funding will see a wider distribution of schemes across the region. And then the other thing I wanted to note was just to thank publicly the officers in Kirklees for the work they've done with respect to our homelessness duty. We've seen a significant reduction in presentations of homelessness, but also a much better use of temporary accommodation. So we've reduced our use of bed and breakfast accommodation, for example, by 40%, and for families including children, that's 58%, because we've prioritised those more vulnerable groups. So just to thank them really publicly for that excellent work.
Well, that is good news. It's good, always good to hear on that. And I think, perhaps Liz, do you want to comment on the housing situation in Kirklees?
Sure, I can do. So as you're aware, the Brownfield Housing Fund programme has a number of constraints around it in terms of having a benefit cost ratio above 1, it having to be on brownfield, etc. So if when we come to the private session, when we've got coming up, where we are moving towards an integrated settlement from the next financial year, we hope to have greater flexibility so that we can support schemes in a different way going forward. So maybe hold that thought and we can feed that into that conversation. But yes, noted and recognise the current geographical spread of the funding. But like I say, we're constrained by some of those government criteria at the moment.
But I think the point's well made. I think Kirklees, Wakefield and Calderdale have to stand up for ourselves. Now and again, we have to give a nudge, so we're not overshadowed by Leeds and Bradford. Sorry, Alex.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I would echo what Moses has said about brownfield sites, and I think it's interesting because we also have lots of mills, beautiful mills and other structures which maybe not looking at them necessarily just as brownfield, but as being able to repurpose them, but they do still take quite a lot of investment and unlocking and maybe encouragement, because actually, but some of them can be turned into very successful sort of housing and stuff. So I think it's not just about can they be levelled and start again, which has its own huge inherent cost, but actually can we repurpose some of those beautiful buildings that are throughout the whole of the West Yorkshire region, all of that industrial revolutionary architecture which still exists and actually is very solid, which is why it still exists. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just a couple of reflections. I mean, I think it's important to note that within the update there was still reference to the fact that the number of children in temporary accommodation is still significant and is rising. I suppose my question is, and I really appreciate the note about the Combined Authority working very closely with local authorities on this, just to get a bit of assurance about are we doing everything we can and are we maximising our collaborative relationships with our partners to support these really vulnerable children and young people. My second reflection is, as the sort of chair of digital inclusion, one of the things that we are really trying to do is support households not only with connectivity but actually harnessing the power of digital, particularly when it comes to accessing services. And I suppose my question, and it's with an offer as well, Chair, is there an opportunity to really build on the work that organisations are doing when it comes to connectivity, with joining it up with the work we're doing with local government on digital inclusion to make sure that people don't only have access to the devices and paid for internet connection, but also the ability to utilise it and maximise their interactions and support social isolation as well.
Yeah, I think that would be a good way of moving that forward, and thanks for the comments on that. Richard?
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, just a quick point, just to follow up on Councillor Courtney's point about repurposing industrial buildings and so on. We, in Historic England, we do take a very kind of progressive and an active role in trying to find solutions for difficult stuck sites and structures, which can be quite challenging. But equally, often there are conservation deficits and viability gaps in terms of bringing those sites forward as well. So I think, you know, a combined sort of public sector response is needed to make the most of that wonderful inheritance that we've got. It's really encouraging actually to see on the list of sites there are quite a number of sites that are involving historic places and structures and so on. I mean, the Civic Quarter in Wakefield, for example. I mean, you know, what the wider regen benefits are just, you know, plain to see, aren't they, when we can kind of bring those kinds of structures and places back into use.
Yes.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to pick up a little bit from what Fatima was saying about temporary accommodation numbers linked in with this repurposing of existing buildings. So in Leeds, we were able to work with the owner of some old, well, they weren't old, they were existing student halls who wanted to offer the lease to us to use for temporary accommodation, which has provided a much more affordable way for us to provide much higher standard temporary accommodation that we can oversee for families. We were able to go in and do some work in the bedrooms and the bathrooms and the kitchens to give people basically a proper flat. For families where there's a separate room for children to sleep from adults, there's cooking facilities, there's proper bath to bath young children, that kind of thing. That's going to be transformative for us, and we've decided to go out and look further around the sector and speak to more people about more leasing opportunities. It's something that we're working on the budget for as well. It's just something to raise here to see whether the combined authority has any resource or potentially convening power that can come forward with helping all of the authorities. Because if we can get something that's more long-term, more affordable and higher quality, then that's a better outcome, especially as we know that families are staying longer in temporary accommodation than we would want them to be. It's just going to be transformative for families if they have proper living spaces as well as cooking spaces and proper bathrooms rather than potentially shared bathrooms in B&Bs or whatever situation, because we're all facing incredible challenges. So that we were lucky that a private sector agency came, a private sector individual came and spoke to us about that lease, but it's shown as a model that we can then go out and try and expand. So I just thought it's worth mentioning here.
Can I just comment? Yeah, I think it is worth mentioning here. And I like the idea, and I think if we could all try and follow that through in our areas, it would make a real difference. Lisa?
Thank you, Chair. Just to mention that we've just had the meeting this morning. I chair the Chamber Property Forum with many of the developers and people in the property industry around there, and I will gladly take that back to them and see if we can generate any leads for you.
That would be good, Lisa, if you could. I mean, I think we all think that model is something that we could follow and really help families. I think we'd be doing a really...
Yeah, I mean, the building that we've been able to use has also obviously got loads of office space and stuff like that. So in the future, we're looking at locating services there as well. We've already got children and families going in. We've got third sector going in to do play with the families and stuff like that. It's just a completely different offer from TA as we know it. That if we can keep it sustainable and if we can expand it, saves our general fund money and improves the experience of people while they're in TA until we get these houses built for people.
It sounds really progressive and a simple idea really that perhaps we haven't thought of before, but thank you for bringing that here. I think that would be good, and if Lisa could speak to people that she knows, we could perhaps move forward on this. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
Can I just add, I mean, firstly, the Homes England stuff is great. I hear so much good stuff about Homes England and the work that they do with, particularly within West Yorkshire and the like. So it's good to see the numbers on that side. Just on the temporary accommodation, just more of a question of the from my side, because work for a housing charity, I know that we get grant funding from councils and the combined authority, but then a lot of that then goes out to the private sector. So I just kind of had a query on, because from the numbers on Leeds, as you've mentioned, are obviously remaining high. Is the stuff that, for example, at Kirklees, is it actually that we're just pumping more money in and therefore we're fixing the problem, or is there something that we're doing? Because that wouldn't really be the preventative side of things in terms of making sure that we're changing things. So I just wanted to get a guide of why Kirk Lees, for example, was doing quite well on that front, and is there a longer term issue or something down the line?
So thanks, yeah, so there's a number of measures. Certainly part of it is getting up. I mean, the idea is to make a better experience for our residents. That's the primary focus, but obviously we will also save money for the general fund, because as others have illustrated, the burden on general fund funding is significant for temporary accommodation. So a lot of the measures that we've undertaken are getting upstream to prevent homelessness in the first place, because obviously if you've got too many people coming into your temporary accommodation, whatever provision you've got, and we've done a similar thing in terms of student accommodation as well, which has allowed us to have those self-contained units. That's really positive. But we obviously also need to work on discharge into the private sector, because if you get people stuck in temporary accommodation, however good it is, you're still building up a bigger problem. So there's a number of measures at both ends of that that we're doing, and hopefully that will save money. But that's a secondary, from my perspective, that's a secondary concern. It's about the experience, particularly of vulnerable groups like families with children, where putting them into bed and breakfast would never be appropriate, albeit that it's also expensive. So a number of measures, happy to talk about that separately. And there's also a good sort of summary of the various measures on the LGA website. It's fairly easy to find if you search for Kirk Lees homelessness response and the LGA. There's a list of all of the independently named initiatives that have been put in place over the last year or two.
Thank you. One thing just about the presentation, and so I'm not the housing lead, and I have sort of get a briefing on it, but so it might be information that it's just not as readily in my head. But on the figures that we're given on the charts in the papers show absolute numbers rather than percentage of population. And so while the absolute numbers are really important in terms of the sort of the bigger picture and how many units may be needed, it might also be useful to know what it is as a percentage of overall housing stock or overall population. Just I think in terms of, because at the moment it's obviously Calderdale's numbers are very low, but that's because we've got a much lower population, so it might be hiding an issue. And the other thing I want to say, obviously, so that's brilliant in Leeds. I think that's a great initiative. We don't have any student accommodation because we don't have a university in Calderdale, and I think Wakefield probably the same. I don't know. I think so. but I was just wondering if that model could be replicated. And although it's easier to do it from student accommodation because they've already got the bathrooms and stuff and that sort of thing in there, I'm just wondering if other buildings that are empty, that maybe have had other uses but are still sort of structurally sound, but would be relatively easy and relatively cheap to sort of kit out with, you know, sort of maybe not quite the individual bathrooms and individual kitchens in quite the same way, but maybe looking, you know, like office buildings and stuff, which still do have bathrooms and kitchens in them, but just maybe not in. So whether that's also sort of something that could be looked at. I mean, it's not as easy as student accommodation, I would have thought, but just, yeah, to sort of support, yeah, in other areas.
Thank you. Yeah, just to pick up on Nathan's point, I think the statistics show that improving picture, which is really positive, and that's thanks, I think, to the work of the Strategic Place Partnership and the work that we've been doing together, Homes England, the Combined Authority and the individual local authorities, but also with the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership as well. And I know Rachel's not here today, but I think that collaborative working's really leading to some results. I think the conversation that we've just had demonstrates we need to do more. There is still that housing need, and obviously we've got the opportunity of the Social and Affordable Homes programme coming very soon. So I think the more we can do collectively as a group to maximise the pipeline coming through to us, then that's you know, really important in terms of making sure we continue that trajectory.
Yeah, I think so. If there's no one else, we'll move on to the next item. But can we note the messaging and information from the dashboard? And thank you for your presentation. It's given us quite a lot to think about. Okay, item 7 is the housing information strategy, and I think Sarah's going to take us through that.
Thank you, Chair. Rebecca.
Rebecca, sorry.
No problem. So this is the regular report that follows on sort of from GE's monitoring indicators to give an update against the 4 objectives of the housing strategy. So I'll take the report as read and just provide some quick highlights for you under each of the objectives in particular. So objective 1, to boost the supply of the right homes in the right places. As was referenced in the last item, particular highlight for this period is the Combined Authority securing a further £21 million into the Brownfield Housing Fund programme. So just for committee to note that takes the entire programme up to £110 million and the target up to 6,240 homes for the programme, which we're on target to achieve. In terms of what's next, as Liz had mentioned, we're working at pace with government to negotiate the integrated settlement, which will be the next phase around housing delivery will be part of that for the Combined Authority. So from a housing perspective, within the Combined Authority, we're undertaking a deliverability review of our opportunities on the pipeline. For members to know, in reference to the last discussion, that's across with each of the local authorities, and it's about talking to each individual local authority about what the opportunities are in their area, and to identify those schemes that are early delivery, but those strategic, more complex schemes that we're all working on as well, what we need to do to bring those into what's hopefully going to be a more flexible set of parameters for us. Moving on to objective 2, improving the provision of truly affordable and accessible and adaptable homes in the region. The primary activity in the period has been the development of the regional submission to the government's £39 billion social and affordable homes programme. So this will be the first time that mayors will be able to set strategic direction with a regional focus into the programme. So whilst the programme is still national and will be led by Homes England, this will give us strategic control to set direction, so to say, which I'll talk more about under the next item, but to say how many homes we need in the region, of what tenure, what type, etc., to encourage bidders, registered providers to be meeting those local needs. Just because the last conversation focused quite a lot on temporary accommodation and homelessness as well, I did want to reference that we're ramping up our work with the West Yorkshire Homelessness Forum as well, which brings together the 5 local authorities to share best practice, but also to look at where we can approaches that are working in particular local authorities, adopt those in other local authority areas. So it's quite new for the Combined Authority to be involved in this area, and we're just starting to build our work. So one of the early things that we've done is held a workshop between the 5 authorities and the RPs on the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership to look at where RPs can maximise using their stock to support discharges of homelessness duties from temporary accommodation, and that's an area that we're doing much more work. And similar on investment models and looking at if there are particular ways that we can bring empty private sector homes into use to be used for discharging duties of homelessness. So that's active work that we're doing and trying to coordinate across the patch. Under objective 3, which is improving the quality of our housing stock, works continuing to be driven forward under Home Energy West Yorkshire banner to develop a 10-year retrofit programme. Guy's already mentioned the figures in terms of social housing decarb and the Warms Homes funding and the implementation happening at pace across those programmes. And then finally, aligned to objective 4, creating places that support the wellbeing of our residents. We're commencing work on the development of the spatial development strategy, which is subject to conversation in the private session following the meeting. And we also have a live consultation at the moment on the local nature recovery strategy that's open until the 16th of November, which would encourage committee members to promote for us and get as many responses as possible. This has strong links to the delivery of housing, and particularly around how housing development can support nature recovery in that strategy. So it's a reference to all the things we want to do in creating better quality development. There's a lot more in the paper. As I say, assume it as read, but if members have any questions, happy to take those. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much for that. Have we any questions? Yes, Fatima.
So, Rebecca, before I start asking my questions, it might be worth just making the committee aware that obviously as the inclusivity champion, part of my role is covered by the health and care system. So a lot of my questions relate to sort of health involvement, just to give you context. So the first one in objective 1, where we're talking about the strategic place partnership working, I'm just looking for a bit of assurance about the involvement of health-related organisations, just reflecting on your feedback, Councillor Lennox, about involving the voluntary community sector within the buildings of temporary housing, a key enabler of targeting the most people in need when it comes to health and care services, having them as close to people in those accommodations as possible. Health's a key partner. Are they part of those conversations? And if not, is there some way in which I can help you bring them in? Because I think it's really important that they're considered. in Objective 2, and it's really great to see the work, particularly on the Dementia Task Force and the amazing impact that's had. I suppose with that in mind, being thoughtful about the contributions we had at the round table with people with lived experience of dementia and their carers, are they continue to be involved in the conversations about adaptability? And is any thought being given to the fact that the NHS system is undergoing significant change? We're thinking about where our strategic priorities will be for certain places, and dementia is going to be a specific area of focus for some of the geographies in West Yorkshire. So I wonder whether there's an opportunity to join up the places that are focusing on dementia with some of the work that you're doing, so that we're focusing our energies in the right places and we've got the right infrastructure to support those really vulnerable communities. And then my final reflection is I also chair the inclusion group work for the health and care system, which focuses on prison leavers and people that are homeless. And one of the things that we were really interested in the work that you've described, particularly that's been convened by the Deputy Mayor of Policing and Crime, is ensuring that we've got some health involvement in those conversations as well, because it isn't just about the housing, it's the housing for health bit that I'm particularly interested in. So if we could have maybe a further conversation outside, but a bit of assurance in this meeting that there is some join up happening, I'd really appreciate it.
Thanks, Fatima. Yeah, hopefully I can give some assurances on that. I do think it's an area we could strengthen, is what I would start by saying, particularly around the SPP. The West Yorkshire Housing Partnership has specific groups, a specific grouping on housing, health and homelessness that brings together the RP members and what they're doing in that space. But there's also linking the ICB, note your point about the restructure that's happening, with ourselves. There's Carl, who's sat over there, might correct me if I get the name wrong, but there's the Housing and Health Network that we also sit as part of, that brings together those health leads and housing leads into one place. So those conversations are happening. I think there's more work we can do to integrate that into the SPP, which myself and Tamsin will take away to think about how we can do that in a bit more depth into some of those ambitions we've got on housing delivery. So I think hopefully that gives some assurance that we are doing it, but be really grateful to pick up that conversation with you about how we might strengthen that further. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Chair. Just to build on the inclusivity agenda, to be honest, and possibly widen it to a social cohesion narrative as well. I think it's really encouraging to hear that there's been, there's work around sharing and learning across the local authorities taking place. I would really encourage that is emphasised and made quite profound within the process. And even at this stage, to identify to what extent the local authorities themselves are drilling down on good practice in your own areas around how the housing strategy can manifest in a way that it brings a more inclusive access for those underrepresented groups, and very strongly for us going forward is how that kind of cohesion across some of the demographics can take place as well. And because that is the biggest agenda in our country right now, and in our region. And finally, where there might well be opportunities in a practicable way to help with the supply chain involvement of local enterprises in our communities and in the kind of development of the housing. So just really for us to start doing some early work on that now before the integrated settlement lands, to be honest.
Do you want to go?
Yeah, I can do. We're already doing a lot of that work, Carl, I think. So we've inclusive growth is a strand and a theme throughout our housing strategy. I think what I'd also say on that is we know that our local authorities hold local groups with the VCSFE sector in their areas. So one thing that we're working out and conscious of at the moment is that we don't step on the toes of that, but look at a West Yorkshire level how we can support some of those networks that are happening. So absolutely take your point. I think we're starting to do some of that, but are conscious to not duplicate efforts that are already happening locally as well in bringing some of those groups together. So my team have done some work at looking at where that's happening already. So for example, one of the kind of most long-standing ones is the Leeds Homelessness Prevention Forum that brings together a lot of third sector partners. There's also a similar one in Bradford that we're aware of, but the other districts also have their own as well. So we're just working out where we add best value at a West Yorkshire level to that, and can still be making sure that those links are being made and driven at a local level.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Rebecca, and it's encouraging to hear that as well. Look, I'm also director of Yorkshire Sports Foundation, and we're looking actively at how some of what we do in the active partnerships can kind of get more involved in kind of joining things up. So where people may not be aware of what you're doing, Rebecca, I think it's very important. And I'm not really bothered about stepping on toes, to be honest. I think we've all got a job to do to make this thing work and work well. So I don't think we'll be overly precious by saying, well, what is the actual plan at the district level, and how can we enhance that plan? Thank you, Chair.
I could not agree with my learned colleague more. And what I would like to sort of say, and to give some assurance, is that many local authority organisations have already or are about to launch their community cohesion strategy. And I think what you're alluding to, and I completely agree, is some assurance that when we're thinking about community cohesion, we're not just thinking of the usual suspects or partners in this space, but organisations like residents associations, or people that are working within supported housing are really clear about, one, the concerns people might have living in those residences, but what their role is to promote cohesive communities, and that's for people from all different demographics. While I have the floor, Chair, if I may, just because Carl mentioned Yorkshire Sport, we're about to launch a week of events at the end of November supporting anti-racism in sport, and it would be really great for colleagues, if they haven't already, to Google what events are happening across the region and to support it, which is a really practical, collaborative effort of us working in partnership to create a safer, more inclusive region.
Well, that was a good plug, wasn't it? Anyone else want to comment on this? Yes, sorry, yes.
Thanks. Moving slightly away from the discussions we've had, I was just wondering if there's any detail, and I'm sorry if I should have already seen this, about the strategy of how the Warm Homes Fund's being applied or being handed out or being used. Because obviously, as landlords, we have our target now for our EPCs, and a lot of us will be doing, after as required by the regulator. I know in Leeds we're stepping up our home condition surveys and making sure that we're getting further and deeper understanding of the quality of homes. And I'm just wondering if there's a strategy for how that funding's being used across the region.
Liz, do you want to come in?
Thank you. Yes. So as you'll know, the Warm Homes funding was a competitive bidding round into government. We drew together a consortium of West Yorkshire housing providers who wanted to be part of that. I think Leeds bid yourselves actually for your own funding. So you will also have had an allocation. We have, I think, across the board, there was many more applications than the government could possibly fund at the moment. So everybody had a reduction in what they asked for. We are now working with those registered providers who are in our consortium, and I know that yourselves are progressing the work. Alongside that, though, we are really keen, and one of the Mayor's pledges is to have a plan for social housing. So what we are doing is we have started some work with yourselves and Kirklees as stockholders, and then the rest of the providers that cover the rest of the region, to start to build up a dashboard of all social homes and the requirements of what we think we know about them at the moment, and where they might need to get to, as you say, around EPC, but also those wider objectives around a warmer home and lower energy bills. And we really hope that piece of work will then enable us to have a different conversation. So rather than saying to government, "Oh, here's another bid," we want to say this is the scale of the challenge that we've got across our social housing, and how can we work together to do that. So there's two things I think happening. So we'll carry on with our Warm Homes funding, but ideally we'd like to get into a place where we've got that better sight of what's needed across our housing stock. And we know that's tricky because landlords have certain amounts of information and data, but sometimes it's only when you start to get into properties that you really understand that, which is also why we're supporting Kirklees on some of the survey data through that consortium that we've already got. So hope that's helpful, but I'm happy to give you some more specifics around the Leeds bit if that's not.
No, thanks. It was the RPs bit that I was actually interested in mostly, because obviously in Leeds we did do a separate bid, but it was the RPs bit because with our OBS law as well coming in and linking to what we've been speaking about with health and how it links with housing, it's just good to know that that there is some sort of strategy across the region around it, because some landlords will be better poised than others to be able to provide that data and apply some of this funding as it comes through, but there'll be a lot for some landlords, probably smaller ones, I don't know, I'm speculating, a lot of work to get the sort of inspections and understanding of the stock up to speed, so it's really useful reply, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, can we note the report? We'll move on to item 8, the affordable housing update. Rebecca, you're on again.
Thank you, Chair. So again, I'll take the report as read. But the main item for the committee to note is a submission of our regional priorities to the Social and Affordable Homes Programme. So as I said before, this is the first time mayors have been able to set out their regional priorities to form part of the prospectus for the programme. So this includes the number of affordable homes that are needed in the region, which for us is around 3,800 homes per year if you add up what the affordable housing need is across West Yorkshire. We've also set out an ambition that 60% of homes should be for social rent, which is aligned with in alignment with national ambitions. And we've outlined priorities such as alignment with regeneration, our climate and environment plan, and things like our dementia-ready housing criteria as things we'd encourage bidders into the new programme to align with in West Yorkshire. We've also aligned our ambitions to the spatial priorities set out across the 3 corridors of opportunity in the local growth plan, so they become a thread through the areas where we want to see development and particularly affordable housing delivered. In terms of next steps, we expect the programme to be launched shortly, in the next few days hopefully, where the regional priorities will be outlined alongside the prospectus for the wider programme. So just moving on in terms of delivery of affordable homes, as Guy referenced, over the last 4 years we've seen a year-on-year increase in affordable housing delivery in West Yorkshire. We've got a strong partnership of RPs in the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership, which Rachel would usually be here to represent the partnership at the meeting, but that partnership deliver around 81% of all affordable homes in West Yorkshire, and we've seen their share of what they've been delivering going up over the last 4 years as well. So following the announcements of the £39 billion programme, the 1% rent settlement for the sector, rent convergence and other reforms, we've carried out an exercise to understand how that impacts the development appetite and capacity of those registered providers in West Yorkshire, so what opportunity there is to ramp up delivery in the region. I provided in the report a few bullet points on some of the themes that are worth noting that have come back from that. So whilst many partners have begun to model what that means for their business plans, most of them are reporting it helps predominantly to smooth out delivery programmes. So previous stop-start programmes meant there was a lot of peaks and troughs in delivery, which were quite a big barrier. So a 10-year certainty of a programme and a 10-year rent settlement helped to even that out across the period. So we should see a steadier delivery trajectory. Partners were reporting a really healthy stream of opportunities across West Yorkshire, particularly land and package deals coming forward more, where a private developer will come forward with an offer of affordable homes for an RP to take up as something that's becoming more and more common, and there's a lot of partnerships being developed directly between developers and RPs that are becoming more common across the patch. So I guess on the other side of it, whilst partners are modelling their development capacity, many of them are also seeing a need to invest more in their existing stock, which is another pull on resources. And we're hearing that quite a lot from partners, that the rent settlement and rent convergence in particular, any additional financial capacity that's being created through that, is a lot of that is needing to go into existing investment in their existing homes to bring them up to new decent home standards, which are expected to also implement the minimum energy efficiency standards, etc. So some of that additional financial capacity is constrained and can't entirely be put into new development, and that's something that we're hearing across the board, and not just in West Yorkshire but nationally as well. So just in terms of the next steps, we're working with MHCLG to refine and publish the regional priorities, as the Secretary expects will be in the next few days. We've just undertaken an exercise to carry out the data collection across West Yorkshire Housing Partnership on their development pipelines, so we're just reviewing that data now and hope to bring it to the next committee meeting. And we have our Strategic Place Partnership Board happening next week, which is chaired by the Mayor, where we will discuss how we put those regional priorities into action and how the Mayor will get greater oversight of affordable housing delivery in the region. So not just saying what the priorities are, how do we measure how that's going to be delivered over the course of the programme. So again, happy to take any questions from the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that question. Fatima?
You started to answer my question, Rebecca, in your summary, because the bit that I was particularly interested in, and I think it's really important, actually, Chair, that we note as a committee the fact that there's been some thought given to the levels of deprivation and about inclusive outcomes, and the fact that there's been a real focus that the housing is where it is much needed. I suppose my question is, how do we know that it's getting there, and how do we know that we're delivering what we're aspiring to do? And you started to describe that the Mayor is involved and will be convening some sort of committee to do that. My question is, what level of expertise, now you're getting the right expertise when it comes to identifying those metrics, and is there any further support needed that you may need from me or for some of the teams that I'm supporting?
Yeah, so the Mayor convenes the Strategic Place Partnership Board, which is the forum that will oversee it because it's new. That's the subject of conversation next week. In terms of the metrics, we do already have suggestions on how we measure them and do measure them in West Yorkshire in some of our dashboard indicators. And my team are developing how we look at the various different protected characteristics, etc., and how we can build that in. Some of that's challenging because it's data that's not always collected by partners, and we're reliant on what data and information partners collect as to how strong we can make some of our data as well. So definitely, Fatima, if there's areas where you might be aware of that we're not, we definitely need to link up with you on that. So would welcome that. In terms of those kind of voices and representation, I think that we try and pick that up through the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership predominantly, and the engagement that they have with their residents and in the knowledge they have of their local areas and the patches where they operate.
It's not really a question, it's more just I suppose a comment that we had just recently in October, our annual housing forum, which was attended by housing developers, registered providers, RPs, voluntary sector organisations, Homes England and other partners, and it provided an occasion for contributors to showcase Colesdale's recent successful developments and promote future opportunities. I think there was also a sharing of policy updates, good practice, challenges, implications, and an opportunity for people to network across the sector. And I think it was sort of generally seemed to be quite a successful event. And I think overall we've got work going on in Calderdale with Whitwell Green and Rawson Wood. With an 18-month build programme which will bring forward 60 new affordable homes, and Keep Note, who are one of our collaborative partners, will also commence its building programme in anytime soon, which includes around 54 new affordable homes, which will be delivered as part of its major housing-led regeneration across 3 sites. So I think that's our numbers might not be big, but compared to some of the others, but we're doing what we can. Yeah. Calderdale. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Sorry to be, I might just have misunderstood this, but can I just clarify under 3.7, it says there's evident demand for affordable housing across the region with 97,000 households on a waiting list. Can I just clarify what that waiting list is? Is that the social homes waiting list? And I just wanted to make the distinction because with reference to Fatima's point about correctly identifying need, there is a very distinct difference between social and affordable. Thank you.
Yeah, so that 97,000 is taken from the housing registers of each of the local authorities. So that's the waiting lists. Yeah, yeah.
Could we ask that be very specifically identified as social home waiting list, because it is very different. Affordable home is 80% of market value and is a bit of a non-specific. I mean, in my ward, for example, affordable is a bit of a misnomer because 80% of market value would still be very expensive. But actually, it's really important to identify the social home need as distinct and as has been identified by the government with respect to the 39 billion, and over 60% attributed to development of social homes in particular. Thank you.
Yeah, just it's on the very same point really. We in our most recent Schmar in Leeds, which is last year now, so it's already like 3 years out of date, that information, but we looked at average earnings in Leeds and applied a percentage of 25% of your income as housing cost, and looked at what the different tenures were against the average earning, and the only kind of tenure that was affordable to people in with the average earning in Leeds is social rent. Affordable rent as it averages out in Leeds comes above that line that was that key line for people of 25% of their income on rent. So that's in Ashmar, and I'm sure it's the same for other authorities.
If I may, Chair, just a point of clarity on how the housing registers work, because they just capture anyone who's waiting for an affordable or a social home, so we can't distinguish between them who could afford which because of how they work, and that's a requirement under the Housing Act 1996 that there has to be a single housing waiting list in a local authority area, which does make it challenging. So recognise your point, but there isn't two separate waiting lists. Just as a point of clarity, there is just one for affordable or social housing. But the level of need amongst that is then determined through banding or whatever the criteria is under each local authority.
Thank you. I keep forgetting that, don't I? The recommendation is that we note the updates and the submission made to the government regarding the regional priorities of the new social and affordable homes programme. Can we agree to that? Okay, thank you. And then the date of the next meeting seems a long way off, but this year's gone in a flash. The 5th of March 26. Okay, and that's the end of the formal meeting. We're going into the workshop now. If anybody wants to have 2 minutes to get a drink or whatever, and then we'll start.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
So we off the streaming?